When you spend £170 including VAT for the Cooler Master MasterFrame 600, you get an ATX tower case that has a glass main panel, loads of aluminium, heaps of perforations, and 3 140mm fans at the front and a 120mm fan at the rear. But you don't get a user guide. Instead, you get a build guide. And you can take it from me, you're going to need the build guide. It's packed with information that tells you loads about the MasterFrame 600, so let's use the Cooler Master build guide to learn more about the MasterFrame 600. Let's look at the broader picture before we dive into the details. So I have a sample of the MasterFrame 600 in black, which means it's black in colour, the glass panel is tinted, and the 4 fans are also black. This also means the case vanishes into a pool of inky blackness in this room, and had I had a sample in silver with ARGB fans, it might have looked slightly better on camera. When Cooler Master was talking about the MasterFrame 600 at the start of this year, they were also talking about various accessories that would be available for this case, and they're showing interchangeable panels on their website right now. While these panels were shown recently at Computex, they are not, as far as I'm aware, currently available, and that's a bit of a shame, but it also means for the moment that is the end of that particular matter. The MasterFrame 600 supports many fans at 120mm, 140mm, 180mm and 200mm. It also supports multiple radiators up to 420mm in size. For me, the attention grabbing feature is that most of what you can see is aluminium, with the exception obviously of the glass main panel. Internally we have steel on the power supply shroud, the drive housing, motherboard tray, and also this cable management plate. And having covered the broader picture, now let's dive into some detail. Let's take a look at how the panels are removed and installed. So on the bottom of this frame we have a couple of posts screwed in place. On the panel we have these hooks, and that sound was the magnets engaging with the steel on the inside of the glass. It's the same deal with the top. And the front. And also the right hand side. And the magnetic filter has fallen off the bottom. Replacing the dust filter on the bottom of the case will give you a flavour of what it's been like working with the MasterFrame 600. So it's magnetic, therefore logically this is steel. By eye, not so obvious. Magnet, there we go. However, aluminium, aluminium, aluminium. You could argue that the mesh pattern would actually act as a filter in its own right. Clearly Cooler Master has thought better of that. They've gone for a finer filter. And you can see we have some screws holding this panel on. 1, 2, 3, 4. But you can also, if you look closely, see some screws coming from the inside of the case. 3 on each side, so a total of 6. In total 10 fasteners. And to replace the magnetic filter, it goes in this channel and between these 4 screw heads. Really easy to do, but it's one of a great many tasks with this case that aren't exactly difficult, but they do get fiddly. And the 6 fasteners, 3 each side that I mentioned, that go from the inside out, there, there, and there. And we have to wonder what those screws and a load of other screws are doing. The 3 140 fans at the front are mounted on a whole series of little brackets, and each of those brackets are attached to the case using some of those screws. The magnets I previously mentioned, they're attached with screws. In the top of the case we have more brackets ready for more cooling, either an AIO or a radiator or some fans. They're attached with screws. On the right hand side we've got masses of hardware, which is primarily intended for storage, so you can attach SSDs or hard drives. Have you ever seen anything like it? And around the back we have these brackets. The top is where you get your 120 fan. That is the output for your motherboard and your graphics card. And here we have a power supply housing. The MasterFrame 600 is described as a modular case, and it certainly seems to be exactly that. So let's take a closer look at those cooling mounting brackets and see what we can install. We already have three 140mm fans in the front and a 120 in the rear. The top, however, is currently unpopulated. And the mounting brackets that we have in the top are the same type of brackets as we have in the front. So we can use this as an example of both top and front cooling mounting. Let's start by taking a look at 120mm fan installation. We've got three Cooler Master Mobius ARGB fans, and here we are. Those 120s go in nice and easily, but what about 140s? I've got three Noctua Chromax 140s. So let's swap out the 120s and replace them with 140s. However, I've installed two 140s in the roof of the case rather than three, and the explanation is you don't have enough space for three 140s unless you move this front I/O panel. Move it to where, you might wonder? Move it to down there is the answer, and that means in turn you don't have enough space for these fans. You have to move this front I/O down there, shift the cooling around, because basically you can swap the front and the top panels. However, the top panel is short. I can show you. The top panel is shorter than the front panel by this amount, which is this amount, which is the front panel I/O. So if you want to swap panels and move the cooling around, you need to move this panel down the bottom. And that's kind of explained in the build guide. There's a certain amount of fiddling around to do. The absolute minimum is that you remove the bottom 140 fan from the front to create some space, and then you take the front panel I/O out. It's secured by a couple of thumb screws, one there which you can gain access to, and one down here. That's just about doable, so we can't complain too much. Clearly the front panel I/O is connected to all these cables, so you need to release those, move the panel down, and the cables are going to have to go somewhere in some manner, but I'm sure that's all doable. And then you can consider which cooling is going to go in the roof of the case, but that's pretty much fine. And then you swap around the two panels. So let's focus on something that looks quite trivial, but is actually more complicated than you'd like. So the Cooler Master logo, which is currently down the bottom of the front panel, but it's going to move to the roof. So you need to move the Cooler Master logo to the front of the case so everything's continued to be lovely and gorgeous. And you simply, according to the build guide, rotate the logo and it won't move. The idea presumably is rotate, remove, replace. And let's have a look at the back of the front panel. To gain access to the back of the logo plate, we have to remove a bunch of screws. Far too many screws. Five on that side. Five on this side. And you'll notice the two hooks on the bottom of the panel are each fastened with two more screws. So that's 14 screws here in total, plus these little location posts, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. Okay, we remove this frame, which is a 4-part assembly with some self-adhesive foam holding it all together. Then we can remove the filter, and now we can use a number 1 screwdriver on the back of the logo plate. Slacken that a fraction, and away comes the logo plate. Oh God, which exactly did that come from? And let's just put that back in what might be the correct position. Level enough, I feel. So it is not a rotate 90 degrees to release like a bayonet fitting and then replace. Not at all. You have to remove all these blooming screws. And that is the essence of this case. It's a seemingly simple idea, and the practice is they have many parts. Parts cost money. Installing parts costs more money for the manufacturer in this instance. And fiddling around doing simple jobs, well, it's fiddly. It's aggravating, and it doesn't improve the quality of my life. So I'm not going to move the front panel I/O, well, the top panel I/O, from there down to the front. I'm going to leave well alone, and I'm going to return to the cooling in the roof of the case once I've reinstalled all these screws. And let's look at a larger fan. Before we can install a 180 or 200mm fan in the roof of the case, we have to move the brackets around. And after they've been moved and the 200mm fan has been installed, it looks like this. The brackets are moved right up to the rear of the case, up against the two magnets that retain the top panel. There's no further scope for moving them to the rear, which means that this fan is as far back as it can go. And you can see if I take a second 200mm fan, it won't quite go in because once again of the front or top panel I/O. Were that to be moved, we could put two 200s in the roof of the case. Now I have to confess, I did not own 200mm fans until very recently. I bought these two Noctuas specifically for this review, just to try them out in this case. And you might wonder, why did I buy Noctuas when surely Cooler Master already has 200mm fans in its portfolio? Cooler Master had a 200mm fan in its portfolio, and that fan is end of life. The MasterFrame 600 supports monster 200mm fans. I suspect you won't be buying them, but it's always nice to have the option. Clearly I could install this second 200mm fan in the front of the case if I first removed the supplied 140mm fans, but that would be madness. I have, however, another option. I could install it there, provided I first remove that drive cage and use some accessories in this big box. In addition to the usual bag of fasteners for installing a motherboard and drives, we have a bag of drive rails, more cable ties and more drive installation hardware. We have a graphics card support. These are the brackets we'll use to install this fan in the floor of the case. This bracket is used to support the power supply if you move it from the floor of the case to the roof of the case. I am not going to move the power supply around because it involves moving a whole load of extra hardware, and that looks like it's going to take bloomin' ages. But I do fancy taking a very quick look at these brackets. Installing the two brackets on the fan is easy peasy. Next step, quite clearly, is to clear some space for the assembly, and that means removing that drive cage. We go to the bottom of the case and let's remove a few screws. A nice simple task. Feels like I need to kind of pull in on the other rubber mount. Okay. And it's out by half a hole. So, a solid couple of mil. And the screws that mount the brackets are on the underside, so I can't do this from inside the case. If I slacken, I think we're going to be okay. one more time. And after a bit of pulling, the 4 screws are installed, and now we have a 200mm intaking in front of the power supply housing, should you want such a thing. It's worth taking the briefest look at this drive cage, because that is also, as with the, which was it, front panel, the multi-part assembly. That's how much I was leaning on that bottom of the case. This is also a multi-part assembly. So the plate that goes in the floor of the case is secured to the bottom of the cage, 4 screws. So the cage itself is quite conventional, typically with, oh I see, I guess they've repurposed it. So it's got 2 tabs. I imagine in some other case it goes into 2 cutouts, goes down, single screw, it's not threaded, so a screw going through just to retain it. Obviously the drives go on rails in there in the conventional fashion. So that is a normal piece of steelwork, and that is essentially an adapter plate to convert this to mount in this case. It's the kind of thing that you might come up with in your workshop at night. You've got some steel and a drill press, and you want to get this inside that, and that's the solution. Okay, and now I've had some fun, I'm going to remove the 200mm fans, get the case back to how it was when it was supplied, and put a PC together. And here we have that PC, and as the BIOS updates on my Asus ROG Crosshair X870E Hero, let's rattle through the specification. The processor's an AMD Ryzen 9 9950X. We have 32GB of G.Skill Trident Z5 Neo RGB DDR5 6000. The graphics card is a Palette RTX 5080 Game Rock OC. CPU cooler is a Cooler Master MasterLiquid 360 Atmos 2, and the power supply Seasonic Focus GX1000. To test the MasterFrame 600, we're using a combination of Speedway Stress Test and Cinebench R23. Our Ryzen 9 processor is drawing 200 watts, and our Palette graphics card around 330 watts. Total system power draw 660 watts. For the first run, the fans are set at 35%, which is 900 RPM, and sounds like this. The ambient temperature is a toasty 27 degrees Celsius, our graphics temperature is 65 degrees, CPU temperature 95 degrees. For the second test, the fans are increased to 50%, which is 1300 RPM, and that sounds like this. The graphics temperature is still 65 degrees, but the CPU temperature drops significantly to 87 degrees. For our third test, the fans are increased to 75%, which is 1900 RPM, and that sounds like this. Graphics temperature is unchanged at 65 degrees, CPU temperature drops slightly to 83 degrees. For the final run, we've put the fans up to 100%, which is 2400 RPM, and that sounds like this. Graphics temperature remains at 65 degrees, the CPU temperature drops a further degree to 82 degrees. Before I come to my conclusions about the Mastercase 600, a point I haven't made so far, which I think is worth covering, is that these 8 corner pieces, 4 top, 4 bottom, so you have 3 members joining together in a socket. There was some speculation when people were talking about this case months ago that they might be screwed in place, which means you could remove the members and possibly move the major components of the case around. That didn't make much sense to me at the time, because obviously the panels have to be able to be installed, so if you shorten a member, I mean, you're basically knackered. And if you want to convert this case to ATX, Micro-ATX, Mini-ITX or whatever, Clearly Cooler Master can do that by changing components. The end user simply cannot. Anyway, the point here is that these members are riveted on the inside into these corner pieces, so the fundamental structure of the case is fixed. Unless you start drilling and de-riveting, it is what it is. Okay, pros and cons. Let's start with the good stuff. You have a high quality look and feel and loads of aluminium. Secondly, there's plenty of space for a large motherboard and extensive cooling. And thirdly, the price in the UK of £170, including those 4 fans, strikes me as rather good value. Cons on the negative side. You have endless options, brackets and screws, and that makes for a tough PC building experience. Secondly, the airflow appears to be quite restrictive. Turning up the fan speeds makes a significant difference to CPU temperature. And that came as a real surprise to me. Big cases very often just flow air even if they kind of leak. In this instance, air didn't seem to find its way through unless you turn up the fan speeds. So, do you want noise or do you want cooling? Thirdly, on the con side of things, the build guide is confusing and complicated. If they didn't include those accessories and options, the build guide would matter less. They have, the build guide matters, and it's not straightforward. Overall, I've thought about this long and hard. I've come down on the side of this is a worth considering, and it's 7.5 out of 10. Do please check us out on TikTok, and we're at kitguru.net on the web.